Hi, everyone. Uh, my name is Walter Chian Tom, and I am the manager of the Concordia Student Union Legal Information Clinic. Welcome to our immigration seminar. Without further ado, we're going to continue on with the presentation on immigration, both in Quebec and as well on the federal level. We are very lucky to have with us today Mtre David Chalk. Mtre David Chalk is a lawyer who is known throughout the country. He is what we call the lawyer's lawyer. If lawyers needed help on immigration, Matre Chalk is who we would turn to. And in fact, Matre Chalk has received several recognitions given by his peers as to the major contributions he's made to immigration law, among which he was given recognition by the ACADI, which is the Association Québécoise des Avocats et Avocates de droit d'immigration, and as well he was acknowledged in several legal publications as a leading lawyer on immigration, and that was voted by, if you can believe it, his competitors, who felt he was so good, okay, that you just cannot deny his expertise and more importantly, his knowledge. That being said, I don't want to take up too much time. If I were going to read, Matre Chalk's resume, we'd be spending the next 15 minutes here. I think more importantly is to present immediately Matre Chalk, and we will have the privilege of hearing Matre Chalk provide and share his knowledge, and as well to answer questions and answers, which we ask for people that have questions and answers to write their questions within the chat. All these questions will be dealt with. Even if we run out of time, we're going to follow up on these questions after this presentation. Because we have a lot of material to deal with, Matre Chalk will be answering these questions after the presentation, because many of the questions you may have might already be dealt with later on in the presentation. That being said, without further ado, I'm going to present you to Matre Chalk. One more thing. For those people that are just coming in, we are recording this session. So, please keep in mind if you have any objections to being recorded, at least, or having your chat recorded, then unfortunately, you'll have to contact us privately at the CSU Legal Information Clinic, because the information that will be put in the chat will be available to be viewed publicly by everyone, as along with the answers, obviously. Okay, so that being said, Matre Chalk.
Thank you for the very gracious and overly complimentary introduction, Walter, and hello to everybody out there in Zoom land. I've done a number of these, both live and now many times on Zoom, and I have to say this is probably the one that I'm the most excited to give, because there's so much change in the past few months, I would say, Quebec-wise, and in the last 3 days, particularly federally. And some of it is really good news for people who have graduated or will be graduating soon. And I think also, just on the Quebec side, we're going to see there's a fundamental change in approach that I think we're all making, where how we look at the pathway to permanent residence is occurring. So this first slide is just a big overview of all the systems. And you can see that our system in Canada and in Quebec has many pathways to permanent residence. We have basic economic classes, which divide into skilled workers and business class and caregivers, and we have a Quebec program and we have a federal program. We're not going to be talking about a refugee or family class, so we're going to be restricted to the red part of that graphic. But you can see already what we are going to be talking about today is the two programs under Quebec selection that you see, and then you'll see under Programme de l'Expérience québécoise, there are two sub-programs, one for students and one for temporary foreign workers. And we're going to start a little bit with the federal program, the Express Entry program. Now, Express Entry, you need to know, is actually an online platform, not a program per se. It's a way to make an application. And the reason I'm going to start with that is because it explains a lot about the way our new system in Quebec, which is called ARIMA, works. So it begins in every case with an applicant going online and creating a profile. And in the profile, you provide the government of Canada with certain kinds of information. Information generally is your age, your education, your work experience in Canada and outside Canada, your education in Canada and outside Canada. And this tells the government whether you qualify for one of its programs. And we'll talk about those programs in just a minute, but the basic idea is you go through an expression of interest, say, hey, I'm interested in applying. If their system then shows that you have qualified for one of the programs, it then ranks you. It gives you a ranking score. Again, more about that a little bit later. And if your ranking score is high enough, you get invited to apply for permanent residence. So this is, you voluntarily do an expression of interest, but you can't go beyond that unless you get an invitation. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this is really not what we said we were going to talk about today, but you should know that basically in one of the two major programs that feeds into Express Entry is the Canadian Experience class, and that's similar to the Quebec Experience class. It has a component of required work experience. You are required to have worked in Canada full-time for at least a year with the authorization to do that work within the 3 years before you put in your expression of interest. And you may not be self-employed. This is a recurring theme. What self-employed means is something that's a little nebulous. And if you are working for an employer where you are either considered sort of doing a gig job like an Uber, or where you have some degree of ownership of the company you're working for, you probably should talk to someone like an immigration lawyer about whether or not you're going to be considered self-employed. And also, you need to have that experience in what the government of Canada will consider to be a skilled or semi-skilled position. And they're going to assess that under using something called the National Occupation Classification, or the NOC as we refer to it. And that is theoretically, also you need to have a pretty good degree of proficiency in either English or French. Level 7 for everything except the skilled trades, and that would be like construction or something like that, where you need level 5. You need level 7, which is a pretty high advanced intermediate level of proficiency in either English or French in reading, writing, speaking, and understanding. But coming back to the assessment of the job, and this is very important because without a job, experience at a job at the right level, you can't get your foot in the door. So you have in the National Occupational Classification, or as we'll call it from here on out, the NOC, you've got 5 skill levels really. You have 0, which is managerial positions, but below that, you have level A, which is professional jobs, doctors, dentists, engineers, computer programmers, things like that. The level right below that is what they consider semi-skilled, which jobs that require either a college diploma or apprentice training, and examples of that would be chefs, electricians, plumbers, things like that. Then level C, and now you're into jobs that will not qualify you for the program. That would be butchers, bartenders, retail sales. And these are important because they're excluded here, but we're going to see there are other places where you can use that work experience to qualify federally. This is brand new. This is what we'll be talking about at the end. So don't lose interest if your work experience is in one of those level positions. And then real labor jobs, which doesn't need much training in the opinion of the government of Canada anyway. So cleaning and maintenance staff, oil field workers, cashiers, things like that. Again, there is a program now in some cases for those people. So again, the 1-year work experience that's necessary to get into the federal skilled workers program as a minimum. These are the minimum requirements that you need is 1 year of full-time continuous work experience in a 0A or B knock position, the level 7s I mentioned, and must have also at least the equivalent of high school a degree or diploma that's equivalent to high school in Canada. And if that degree or diploma is from outside Canada, you establish that it is equivalent through a foreign credentialing agency. The government of Canada has some private organizations that they have designated for that. You pay them a little bit of money, you send them your information, and they send you an equivalency study. So to get your foot in the door in the federal skilled workers points program, you need 67 points. And here's the maximum points for the major criteria for that. English and French skills, a lot of points there, and those are important to, again, but you're going to get some of those because you have to have pretty good level proficiency to be eligible. Education, we'll come to that in a minute, how they do that. Experience, again, once you hit 3 or 4 years, you're going to max out your points. Age, pretty important with 12 points in there for that, so that's for demographic concerns. Again, a similar number of points, 10 for a job offer in Canada. We'll talk about that a little bit. Adaptability. There is, I'm just going to mention this quickly, a federal skilled trades program, which has a lower requirements for language, level 5 for speaking and listening, level 4 for reading and writing, and it includes occupations like chefs and cooks, butchers, bakers, construction and electrical trades. You need to have 2 years of work experience, maybe in Canada, maybe not, or equivalent part-time experience in one of the trades that's on a list that's on the Government of Canada IRCC website. And you also need a job offer in that skilled trade or a certificate of qualification from a Canadian credentialing authority. So, assuming for now, we're not going to get into the details because that's not what this presentation is about, but assuming that you had either that 1 year of work experience for the Canadian experience class, you have your language requirement, or you've got your 67 points necessary to qualify on that grid we just looked at as a skilled worker, now you're into a pool. You've gone from expression of interest, your profile is now in a pool, and you will be ranked using a whole series of factors. Again, this is not the presentation we're doing today, but you can see that there are different scores, different points available depending on whether you're single or in a couple. That's relevant. So there's a very good tool online that will help you calculate this. Again, this is not really what today's presentation is about, but you need to understand that to do that expression of interest, if you've got the basic qualifications for a program, you then get an invitation to apply for permanent residence. And the Government of Canada does this in rounds. This is a little out of date now, but that's not really important at this point. And they've been focusing on inviting people who are already in Canada because those are the people whose applications they can process. So you see on the right that they do that based on the ranking score to the top people within a certain number. So you'll see, for example, on the 21st of January, they did a round where they invited actually a pretty significant number of people, 4,626. And you had to have a ranking score, or a CRS as it's called here, of at least 457 to get that invitation. There was a round just recently in the month of March where they made a very large number of invitations to people who even had really low CRS scores, as low as under 100. But that's not what we're interested in today. That's all in the past, and that won't help you. And we're not going to spend time going on how the point system works. But if you can look it up online, or I think this PowerPoint will be available to people who are interested afterwards. Here's where you can go and get information. And the reason I'm skipping through this quickly is, first of all, this is not on that program, this presentation. And second of all, I want to spend more time on the Quebec program because that's what we're supposed to be talking about. So what you need to begin by understanding is that Quebec is different from every other province in Canada where immigration is concerned. And the way that it's different is that it has a delegated authority that was given to it by the Government of Canada to make its own immigration laws. That goes back to the late 80s. It was the Gagnon-Tremblay-McDougall agreement. And that agreement allows Quebec to select and choose which economic immigrants it wants to come to Quebec. And the way it does that, the way it tells the government of Canada that it has selected somebody, is to issue a selection certificate, or a CSQ as we'll refer to it. So that's the document you get at the end of the Quebec program, and that's how the government of Canada recognizes you as a person who has met Quebec criteria and can apply for immigration to Quebec. So Canada then you have to make a second application, you pay a fee and you make an application to Quebec. And then after that, you make another application with different forms and different documents and a different fee, and you paid that to the government of Canada. And all they're looking for is to see whether you are inadmissible, whether there is some reason not to allow you to go forward and become a permanent resident. Those could be security reasons. You have, unfortunately, at some point in your life, or criminality, you got convicted of something. Health reasons, you have, unfortunately, let's say, a condition for which you require dialysis, which is expensive and in short supply in Canada. So that might, in some situations, make you inadmissible. Or misrepresentation reasons, meaning that in some application, some part of your application, you told the government of Canada things that weren't true. So Quebec already has taken care of the selection. Canada is looking at admissibility in the program. So this is how your organogram of how it runs, and you can see that. Now we're going to get into that part, Programme de l'Expérience Québécoise, which has two components: one for graduates of educational institutions in Quebec, and the other one for people who have worked as temporary workers in the province of Quebec. The other program doesn't require you have worked or studied in Quebec. It's a general sort of points-based program in theory that is for skilled workers. The person needn't have been in Canada or Quebec ever in the past. It's not actually working that way. We'll talk a little bit about that more as we get into it, but those are the two main programs for Quebec. So we're going to talk first about the general Quebec skilled worker program. So Quebec, in its immigration regulation, defines a skilled worker as a foreign worker who settles in Quebec to hold employment that the foreign national is likely to be able to hold. And again, we have a point system based on certain criteria, which we'll look at. And you start the ball with what in a system called ARIMA, which is Quebec's online system. And there's an invitation after that to apply. So in this system, there are a total of 120 points available on in 9 different factors. An important one, and the first one, is education. And for education, what makes Quebec system a little bit complicated is that they not only look at your level of education, which is the first part, and you can max out your points with either a master's or a doctorate, where you get 14 points. And you need to have, as a minimum, again, at least the equivalent of a secondary education, general secondary, not professional secondary, which is 2 points. But after that, it gives you points for your level of education, and then as many as potentially 12 points for what kind of training you have, what they call area of training. Area of training is all about the government of Quebec's evaluation of how much in demand your particular field of study is for employers. So they're not looking at your work experience, they're looking at the training that you have and how much employers in Quebec might want to hire you on the basis of that, or how many employers in Quebec are looking for that kind of credential when they're hiring right now. And that is based on a list that is subject to change every year. And one important thing for you to know is if you submit an application and while the application is being processed, the list changes, you are subject to the current list. So if your points go down, that unfortunately can make the difference between a passing score and a not passing score without anything in your application having changed. All this changes the list for the area of training. There are also points for the principal applicant's spouse or common law partner. There are many fewer points available, but they can be important points where you're close to the limit. So you'll see there's a list online, and we'll have links for this. And there are lists for university level, college level, high school level credentials. And there are two columns always, one on the left, one on the right. The one on the left is for quote unquote foreign degrees, and the one on the right is for Quebec degrees. For the purposes of our discussion today, you may be interested to know that Quebec degrees include Canadian degrees as well. So any degree from Canada, whether it's from the province of Quebec or elsewhere, gets Quebec degrees points. And you'll also see in the red highlighted portion that there are points specified in each case for a principal applicant and that principal applicant's spouse or common law spouse. So how do you know if you have foreign training? If you have training in Quebec or in Canada, it'll be obvious because it corresponds directly. But how do you know for a foreign degree whether your bachelor's degree or something like that is equivalent, will be considered equivalent to a bachelor's degree in Quebec? And the way you find out the answer to that very important question for most people is you submit your, usually your degree and your transcript and translation of that transcript if needed to the government of Quebec, and they will give you an equivalent study, and they'll charge you $123 for that this year. And there's the link for where you can go to get that information. And although technically the officer isn't bound by the equivalent study, it's very, very rare that an officer is going to award points differently. So then you have points for your work experience, and you're only going to get points for work experience in a level 0A or B occupation. And again, you're starting to get points for work experience after 6 months. And you've maxed out your 8 points once you get 48 months. This is work experience, whether in Canada or Quebec or elsewhere. Then you have connaissance linguistique or language knowledge. And your points in all situations are going to be based on results in a standardized test. So Quebec has a list of standardized tests. Interesting thing is that whereas, for example, for English tests, the government of Canada has 2 tests, one of which is TOEFL, and oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the other one. But the other one, anyway, the other one is good I blank on it because I'm talking about Quebec, because Quebec doesn't recognize that test. The only one that you can get English language points from is the TOEFL. Again, points available in French for the spouse, not in English. There are no points available in English. Maximum, there you see that the points are very heavily weighted to French. 16 points available for someone who has a degree of fluency in French if they're a principal applicant, and a maximum of 6 points available for pretty much fluent English. There are also some interesting points available where you can get 5 points for having stayed in Quebec for having been a student for 3 months or more, so for pretty much every Concordia student or other student who's been here for 3 months or more, those points are available. And you can also get some points for close family members who are permanent residents or citizens and living in Quebec. You'll see those are basically first-degree relatives, spouses, parents, grandparents, siblings, children, and grandchildren. So if a couple, by the way, if a couple have children while the principal applicant is studying, that gets them some points because the child's a Canadian citizen. Ironically, fewer points than if the child was born outside of Quebec. The idea being that bringing more young people into the province is a demographic bonus, and I guess that explains why a child born outside of Canada is worth more than a child born in Canada. One difference between Quebec and the federal program is even though the point requirements are different, you're not penalized for applying as a single person because the pass marks are different. So you have a lower point requirement if you're applying alone or as part of a couple. So, and then within the evaluation, there is a mini evaluation of only certain factors for the spouse or common law partner: their level of education, their area of education, their age, and their oral French language proficiency. So you've got a total of, let's see, 8, 11, 17 points there available for the spouse. I should mention, actually, coming back to that, an interesting and not always well understood thing is you're not, even if you are in a relationship, you're married or you have a common law partner, You are not required to apply for them. So there may be situations where, in order to qualify, a person who's married or has a common law partner is going to apply alone. That's an option. It's important to know that option exists. Then there's another factor criteria called financial self-sufficiency. And basically, that is a contract that the government of Quebec wants you to sign with them, basically promising that you will not collect welfare for the first 3 months after becoming a permanent resident in Quebec. So they require that they say that you will have, at the time of becoming a permanent resident, for example, for a single adult this year, $3,284. If for a family of 2 adults and 1 child, the amount would be a little under $5,400. There's really no check that's ever made. You're not required to show that money in a bank account or something. As I said, really what it is this contract that you won't ask for or really be eligible for welfare in the first few months after becoming a permanent resident. And you get 1 point only for that, but it can be a point you need. So when you're doing the point evaluation, it's a two-step process. You have to pass at what's called preliminary processing and then selection. So you see, for a single applicant, you need 43 points. If you're married or have a common law partner, 52, and then 50 on selection, and then 59 if you're part of a couple. This, and you won't be able to see it, I'm sorry. But this is, and there's a link for this, this is useful to work out by hand what your points would be. This is the grid, and this is a 2017 one, but it hasn't really changed since then. Except for, actually, there is one thing that's changed a little bit, and that's the validated offer of employment down there, where there are now more points available if you're offered a job outside of Montreal. But unfortunately, they haven't made a new grid, so I'm working with the old one. Anyway, just so you know. So if we start with this hypothetical case of a person who has a bachelor's degree in computer engineering in Quebec, 6 months of work experience in a 0A or B knock position, is aged in that sweet spot of between 18 and 35 years of age. And you will also see, anyway, we'll come to some hypotheticals. Sorry, we'll just come to those in just a sec. So, obviously the student has been in Quebec for more than 6 months and has no family here. Their accompanying spouse has a bachelor's degree for 3 years. They don't get any extra points for their area of training. They're again in that sweet spot of between 18 and 35 years old. They don't speak French. The applicant doesn't have a validated job offer. We're going to talk a little bit about validated job offers later because they've become really important. And they don't have any children, and they can, in good faith, sign that self-sufficiency declaration that they've got, the $4,000-something they need to settle. So in this case, if it was a single applicant, not a couple, we can see that for the education level with a bachelor's degree in computer science, bachelor's degree gets 10 points. Computer science gets 12 points because it's a high demand computer engineering, area of training. You get 4 points for that 6 months, but less than a year of work experience. The maximum 16 points for the principal applicant for their age, no points for French, and 4 points for English. So the English is pretty good, not as good as it could be. There's a couple more points potentially to be had there. For that stay in Quebec, 5 points. And in this case, we're looking at a single person. So the stuff for the spouses isn't relevant. So 43 points required, we're getting 51. So we're good. Now, then we look at the additional points for children. There are no additional points to be had there. We get that 1 point for signing that contract. So we've got 52 points, 50 required. We're good. That's a potentially successful application. So we're going to look at the same scenario, this time with a spouse. And everything is the same, except as you see, the spouse is getting only 3 points for education, none for area of training, 3 for the age, none for language. So they're okay at preliminary processing, 52 points required, they're getting 57. They're only picking up an additional 1 point for financial self-sufficiency. So they're 1 point short of qualifying as a Quebec skilled worker. That's a problem. Now, I mean, we could talk about different ways for them to pick up points. As I said, there's some points available for a better English result. There would be some points once they'd worked some more for English for experience. There would be, if they had a child, there would be more points, or would be 4 points. So that would solve the problem right away. Although I always tell clients it's a really terrible idea to have children for immigration purposes. But that just, I think, illustrates the significance of applying potentially as single or as couple, and also that not everybody who's a graduate is going to qualify. Although, sorry, to go back to that last one, you can look, with that huge amount of points for education, that person, even without perfect English, is qualifying nicely. Now, if those points went down, if computer engineering was judged to be in less high demand, or they simply offer fewer points for that area of training, and even at the maximum, which has happened before, the results could change, and that's unfortunate. The good thing is that these applications now are being processed relatively quickly, so that the chance of something changing while the application is being processed is less. And also, we know in advance when the points will normally be changed, so you can know whether you're at risk based on when you're going to apply, more or less. So how do you apply? We're going back to how do you make this application in the regular Quebec program. So the applications are only going in through ARIMA, where you start with that expression of interest. You need to be very careful that when you do that expression of interest, that all the information is absolutely accurate. Because you should know that you will be requested to provide evidence of everything you have declared. So the way that plays out, something important for you folks to know, is that, for example, for work experience, something that I've seen applicants, for example, from India, who declared they did and genuine, sincerely and honestly declared that they had done some sort of placement, job placement, often related to their studies right afterwards, or they'd done an internship. But they never got any documents about their income, because the income was so low that under Indian law, they didn't need to, and they would have difficulty to go back to the employer and get good proof of that work experience. In that situation, you are better not to declare that work experience, because it will turn out to be a bigger problem than anything else. You need to think about what documents are going to be required for the declarations you're going to make, and whether getting those, you have those documents, and if you don't, whether getting those documents could become a problem. So as we've written in here, at the beginning of the process, before you begin the process, make sure you know what the documents are, and you either have them or can get them pretty quickly. So the Quebec, now we're moving on to the Quebec Experience Program, the PEC. It's often referred to the Programme d'Expérience Québécoise. So the intention is to transition to permanent residence, give a Quebec selection certificate to people who have a solid command of oral French. They don't look at ability to read and write, and are already in a good position to succeed in Quebec in the labor market, either because they have done relatively lengthy studies here, which would be post-secondary or professional secondary. And studies have shown that those people succeed better in the job market than other immigrants who don't have that credential, or have worked here full-time for at least a year in a skilled or semi-skilled occupation. So the equation that functions here is that French plus studies or work in Quebec equals CSQ. One new thing that has happened is that as of January 26th this year, those applications, which were formerly a pretty simple paper application, now have to be made, must be made on the ARIMA platform. And one important thing for you to know if you're thinking about doing one of these applications is that the government of Quebec has put online some actually quite helpful tutorials. These are intended for people who have a decent command in French, so understandably the tutorials are in French only, but you should know they're there, and if you're going to do that kind of application, it's worth a little bit of your time to go through them. So an important question is, so many people may have a choice between may have a choice between the regular program and the Quebec Experience program. Sorry, we've already been through this. I was mentioning earlier the importance of validated job offers. So what you see in this table, which is based on a quite recent access to information request that was made to the government of Quebec, you look, there are two columns here. No OEV, an OEV is an offre d'emploi validé. It's a validated job offer. So you have a column without an OEV and one with an OEV. And if you look historically, we used to have very big numbers of people coming through the regular skilled worker program in Quebec, and you can see those numbers peak in 2016 and then fall off significantly after that. A lot more of the applications were going through the Quebec Experience program starting in 2017, and then starting in 2019, the numbers were reduced by the current provincial government. But what I think is interesting, if you look at 2020 and 2021, and I should mention that the statistics for 2021 were taken as of March 19th, what you see is that a much bigger proportion of those skilled worker applications are people who have a validated job offer. And if you look in 2021, you even see that a majority of the applicants had a job offer, a validated job offer. Why is that? That is because the only people who were getting invitations in ARIMA in the regular skilled worker program in 2020, most of 2020 and 2021, were people who had a validated job offer. The other numbers are primarily people who had applications that were discontinued by the government of Quebec in the middle of 2018, and who were then allowed, given automatically because of that, because their applications were canceled, were given the opportunity to apply in ARIMA. All of the other new applications are people who have validated job offers. So let's look a little bit at what it takes to get a validated job offer. To get a validated offer of employment, there's some requirements about the employer. The employer can't be a very new business. The employer must have been in business in Quebec for at least 12 months. And there are a couple other requirements about recruiting local employees, or you have to show also that you could train somebody locally to do the job within a year. But what's important to know is that those two requirements don't apply at all if the person is already here as a foreign worker and working in that job. So after that, the employer simply has to show that they're offering a full-time job, that's to say 30 hours a week of employment or more, and that they are paying the normal salary for that job and for that level of experience in the job. And I've got a link here to how you determine that. The government of Quebec has sort of a system where you can figure that out. And they have to pay an application of $205. Another important thing to mention, I said, be careful for self-employed. The employee, one of the requirements is the employee cannot exercise control of the business that they are getting the offer validated for, as an owner or otherwise, and you will find the details on the requirements there in sections 98 to 102 of Quebec's immigration regulations. And here's what I think is your takeaway about an offer of employment. Remember, the numbers right now of people with validated job offers is fairly small, but a big proportion of the people who are getting in. And I think it's a sort of a mysterious process still for a lot of people. It's not that much use. So you need to take away, I think, a few things. First of all, it's not that hard for the employer. They're not asked for a lot of paperwork. And at $205, it usually costs most employers more money to train somebody and to hire somebody to replace an employee they have who they like. So it's not a process that's normally going to put off an employer if they want to hold on to an employee. Second thing you need to know is, it used to be the case that an application under the PEC was processed in 4 weeks. And an application under the regular skilled worker program in Quebec could take months or even years. That's no longer the case. Both are supposed to be processed now within 6 months, the same processing time. And in practice, we have seen lots of applications where there's a validation processed once the person has the invitation in 2 months and sometimes even less. So the processing time of the regular program now pretty good, not a problem anymore. The downside, as we mentioned earlier, of the regular Quebec skilled worker program is you need a lot more paperwork than for the Quebec experience program. But the Quebec experience program can be very attractive for applicants who meet the point requirement, because we're going to talk about the PEC in just a second. The Quebec didn't have before, but now has requirements that applicants have to have worked for a particular amount of time, and they have to do various other things, which may make it possible to apply earlier in the regular program than in the PEC, which really wasn't the case, because you used to be able to apply literally the day after you finished your degree or your diploma. Not the case. But somebody who comes here, let's say as a temporary foreign worker, and who didn't have the points when they were outside the country but now does, they may be able to apply immediately for their Quebec selection certificate. So we'll look at that a little bit more. Just keep that in the back of your mind.
David, I just want a quick question, right?
Sure.
Labor market impact assessments and the cost for them. I understand that here, okay, if the person is already, entering into the exceptions, it's not necessary. But isn't that process still necessary for a validation?
No, it's actually almost a well-kept secret that it's much easier to get a validated job offer in Quebec than to get a labor market impact assessment for those who aren't in immigration law. When a person is applying as a temporary foreign worker to come work for a Canadian employer from another country, they normally have to go through a process called a labor market impact assessment, or an LMIA. And for the LMIA, the employer has to jump through a lot of hoops and do a lot of paperwork, and they're subject to a lot of inspections by the government. The employer really has to want that employee to be willing to go through it, and the cost of the employer is over right now between Quebec and the federal government over $1,400, and it takes months. This process is faster, much easier, and creates less obligations for the employers, and costs $205 instead of $1,400. And here's another interesting thing. I'm sorry, I'm getting into a little bit of the weeds on immigration law, but this may be interesting for a couple people who are in jobs and interested in this. So if you're coming up to a situation where you're not eligible for the PEC, but you want to get a selection certificate fairly fast, because a selection certificate actually gets you an exemption in some situations to LMIA. So your employer does the validation. That takes about 2 months these days. You do your profile, you get your invitation, you go through the Quebec, you go through the ARIMA process, if you're lucky, another 2 months. Now it's like 4 or 5 months later, you've got your selection certificate. Now, to keep you on, you can do a type of work permit called an A75, which requires a selection certificate. The employer, again, has to do something only very inexpensive and easy for them. And you can keep working for that employer while you're waiting for your permanent residence. So, in fact, if you're smart, you can now use a validation and the CSQ that comes after it as a work permit strategy in addition to a permanent residence strategy. In fact, for a lot of LMIAs, the processing time could be as long as that 4 or 5 months to get the CSQ and the validation. Anyway, sorry, we're getting into the weeds of, this is fun for immigration lawyers. I'm not sure how much fun it is for the rest of the world, but let me get on to the PEC and the advantage. So again, certainty. The government of Quebec has, until now, not capped the numbers of applications they'll take in. So you have certainty that if you meet the requirements, you're going to be able to qualify. That's a valuable thing these days. You're not waiting for an invitation. You qualify, you make the application. The documents are easy to get. There's not that many of them. And again, this is what I was just talking about with Mtre Tom, is once you have your Quebec selection certificate, assuming you have a job, that allows you, even when your postgraduate work permit is finished, it allows you to keep working with your employer in Canada until you become a permanent resident. So how do you qualify for the PEC? These are new requirements, right? They changed, they have just changed last summer. So 8 basic requirements. You have to live in Quebec. This is in the temporary foreign workers. Right? There are two parts. There's the international student and the worker one. This is the worker one. You have to have the intention of staying here and of holding a job here. You have to have lived here in Quebec with the primary goal of working. And actually, I keep forgetting to take this out. Accompanying spouses can apply under the PEC. I'm sorry, I keep meaning to take that out. I will today. And have respect to the conditions of your stay, meaning that when you work, you have permission to work. You have to be legally in the province of Quebec. And with permission to work, you have to have had a full-time skilled job for at least 24 of the 36 months, 2 years of the 3 years preceding your application. So previously, you only needed 12 months of work experience in 24 months at any level of the NOC. Now it's 0A and B of the NOC, and it has to be 24 months within 36. And you have to be working at the time of your submission of your application. In fact, the wording of the regulation is at the time of the application, and that the application is considered to exist from the time you submit it until the time it's approved. So theoretically, at least, this could be the entire period of time, but the government of Quebec, from what we've seen, seems to be interpreting it to be at the time of submission only. You have to show through one of the means that they have designated an advanced intermediate knowledge of French. We're going to talk more about that a little later in the presentation. And you have to say that you can take care of yourself for 3 months after you become permanent resident. And you have to be, this is pretty easy, at least 18 years old and have a valid passport. So the student wing has similar requirements. You have to have been here as a student and respected the conditions of their stay. Now, I'm going to mention, actually, this is something that looks innocent, but has been causing a lot of trouble for certain people. Those people predominantly are people who came here with often a study permit that authorized them to study in a university or CEGEP and switched over to studying at the professional secondary level at a trade school here and didn't get both a new Quebec acceptance certificate for those studies and a new study permit. Now, there are all kinds of legal issues attached to that. Not really my job in this presentation to go into them, but if you were somebody who applied to study at one school or one kind of program and switched to another, before you come to the conclusion that you are eligible to apply for the PAC, you might want to talk to somebody or do a bit of research on your own as to whether you potentially don't have a problem. The other requirement, which is also sometimes a problem, is you have to not have had a scholarship with a condition that you return to your country of origin after completing your studies. And you have to have the intention of settling in Quebec to hold a job, which means that you have not studied another, you have not started another course of study since you completed the previous one. So sometimes you'll see somebody who applies in the PAC and then applies for a new Quebec acceptance certificate for new studies, and the government of Quebec will come back to them and say, which one do you want to cancel? Your Quebec selection certificate application or the one that you submitted for Quebec acceptance certificate, because you can't have both. Now, this is particularly relevant this year, in this past year, in the context of COVID, is it's also a requirement that the person has lived in Quebec for at least half of the duration of their study program. So for students who will have, say, done their first year of study online from outside of Quebec, studying from home online is fine, but if you were in another country monitoring your courses online, if you had a study permit, you subsequently are able to come here to study, you need to think twice before you decide to do off-campus studies in another country, in an exchange program or something. If that would take you under the 50% mark, you may not qualify. And also, you may have problems out in McGill. That's a problem for your degree. Although, no, you would have studied McGill, not studying at this. So, only certain diplomas obtained in Quebec are eligible for the Quebec Experience Program. those diplomas, and you'll find that in the regulation. Under the current version of the Quebec Experience Program, as I said before, having studied in one of those diplomas, which could be any university degree, diplomas diplomas, or even professional secondary that represents at least 1,800 hours of study. Sometimes you can combine a couple programs to get your 1,800 hours. It's a little, excuse me, complicated and not all that interesting to explain to people who don't have to worry about that. You then, in order to apply and defect, have to additionally have worked for at least 12 months in a level 0 A or B job. So that means that if you're a recent graduate and you think this is a program you're going to want to apply in, think twice before you take that barista gig at the new coffee place, because that may not help you to qualify for your Quebec selection certificate, just an example. Or if you had one of the if you have level C work, and that level C work is related to what you studied for, so it's more likely to be a technical SAGEP degree diploma or a professional secondary diploma, you have to have worked. You have to have 18 months work experience. And again, that the level C work must be related to your field of study. So another requirement for international students is they have to do that undertaking not to take money from Quebec for welfare for the first 3 months. Again, here we have the numbers again. I think I put them up too many times, but there you have it. Be at least, again, you have to be at least 18 years old and legally residing in Quebec at the time of the submission of your application. Now, you could be just a simple visitor. You don't have to have any particular status, but you have to have some kind of legal status here when you make your application. Now, this is the part that gets a little bit tricky. And actually, I said it's a requirement for students, but it's a requirement for everybody in the Quebec Experience Program. So the way you can qualify is that you either completed a program in French, which means you studied in French entirely in Quebec or elsewhere in French, or, I'm sorry, you studied in Quebec in French, or you have a result of a standardized French test. It's judged equivalent to level 7. And also there were, prior to July 22nd last year, certain courses that you could do, and you can still use those. Not a great idea, but you can still use them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. They used to be something we talked about a lot. I'll just say that you're a lot better off probably providing the result of a French test than providing the grades you got for one of those courses that you took before and you registered for before July 22nd last year. You can also get it by showing you qualify for one of the professional orders in Quebec, that you successfully completed outside of Quebec 3 years of full-time studies in French, secondary or post-secondary level. Oops. But you need to know this. Whatever the case may be, especially if you're not a native French speaker in particular, the MIFI, that's Quebec Immigration Authorities, may call you in for an interview to assess whether or not you really have that advanced intermediate level in oral French understanding and speaking that they require, even if you have given them standardized test results. This is happening. So if you go to the interview, and the interview is with a French teacher and an English, actually generally what's happening is you have an immigration officer in the room, although socially distanced, and you have a French teacher who is interacting with you online and asking questions and conducting an interview to assess your French knowledge. And if you come out of that with a level 7, advanced intermediate, you're fine. You're going to get your Quebec selection certificate. But if you are even at level 6 or anything below level 6, you may find yourself with the MIFI accusing you of having misrepresented your ability in the French language. And that has serious consequences. That can lead to you being banned from making a new application of any kind for Quebec immigration for 5 years. Now, some of you may remember, may have maybe even heard me in other presentations where we talked about some litigation that we did with help from Concordia that went all the way up to the Quebec Court of Appeal, where we got a beautiful decision, and we were contesting the right of Quebec to hold exactly these French interviews. What you need to know, though, is that we were contesting their right to do that under a different version of the Quebec regulation. The wording was changed in August 2018. So under the old wording, the Quebec Court of Appeal said that Quebec definitely did not have the right to do anything other than receive the credentials that they said were deemed to be proof that the person had the necessary level of French. Now, they are playing what appears to me to be kind of a really dirty trick. When you get to the interview, one of the first things that happens is the interviewer, the Quebec officer there, asks the person being interviewed, do you think that you have advanced intermediate French, level 7 French? And of course, people are naturally going to answer, yes, of course they think they do. And after that, after they've asked you that question, they hold the interview. And if the result is below level 7, they have come back to people, clients of mine, and said, you lied. You told us on the very day that we interviewed that you had advanced intermediate French, but yet when we conducted that interview, you did not. Now, I have a couple things to say about that. First of all, the applicants are not experts in assessing French language. If they were, they wouldn't have to do any tests. The only reason to ask a person that is to later use it as the basis to accuse them of misrepresentation. Second of all, sometimes people are wrong. One of my colleagues this week went to an interview with one of his clients, and his client came out, of course, had said that they felt that they had the level, did the interview, came out of the interview, told them, I failed for sure. It didn't go. I don't think it went well. Went back in to see the officer again after having done the interview, and the officer said, good news, you passed. So I think the lesson I have for that is applicants, even after having done the interview, are not good at assessing their own level. And so my advice to someone going to one of those interviews who gets asked by an officer, do you think you have this required level 7 in French, would be, I don't know. I hear I'm going to do a test. Let's do that and we'll all find out. The other new thing, and this affects applicants in all of the programs in Quebec we've been discussing, is there is a requirement for every applicant to obtain in an economic program an attestation. This is a beautiful name. Only a bureaucrat could love. An attestation of learning about democratic values and the Quebec values expressed by the Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms. So this is to ensure that people who come to the province are basically on board with fundamental rights and values of and freedoms that we enjoy in Quebec. And there's an online test that they have to pass. The test is done at home, is basically unmonitored. I think it's 20 questions that you have 90 minutes to do it. The preparation materials are offered in 4 languages, French, English, Spanish, and Mandarin. It's not meant to be a sort of a substitute for a French test. And if you were thinking about worrying about this, let me present you some statistics. So the MIFI on an in response to an access to information request showed that in 2020, 99.54% of almost 15,000 people who took the test passed on the first try, and you are allowed a second try, actually even the third try. There were 51 people left, and all of those passed on the second attempt. So in other words, out of almost 15,000 people who took the test online in 2020, none of them failed. So now I'm just going to run you through a few quick exercises so that, and I don't have I'm sorry, I usually do this in a live setting and can't do that here, but we'll do it together and we'll pretend it's live. Some questions and answers, just to sort of fix in your mind some of the things you need to be thinking of. So it's in the first exercise, Anne is graduating from a 1,400-hour secondary school diploma. Can she apply for a CSU under the PEC? Why or why not? So the answer is no, because her program is too short. You need at least an 1,800-hour program. As I mentioned, there are situations in which you might be able to do a second diploma that's related to the first, and if the two of them together come out to over 1,800, that works, but not if you have only that 14-hour secondary school diploma. So Anne might not have that, but she might get a postgraduate work permit that would allow her to accumulate the work experience she needs to later apply on the basis of her work experience. Second exercise has Bertrand, who's about to graduate with a bachelor's degree and will like to do a master's degree next. He wants to apply for a CSQ. I guess actually, I'm sorry, this no longer works, but he can't do that until he has the work experience also, but assuming he has the work experience. He wants to apply for a new CSQ and study permit so that he can complete his program before he becomes a permanent resident. Can he do that? Nope, because he has the intention to start new studies. Now, he could get around this, by the way, just so you know, by studying outside Quebec. He's allowed to study outside Quebec while he's waiting for respect, but not in Quebec. And the last one was Charlotte, who is francophone. She did a bachelor's degree in the French language at the University of Quebec. She has a she had a CAQ, so she was legally entitled to do her studies, but part of her studies were in English. And she had a I haven't updated this example, sorry. And she had a postgraduate work permit and held a job at a level B knock for 12 months. She decided she wants to stay in Quebec. What can she do? Well, she can apply as a diplomatic. Why? Because her other studies were in French, and she had completed her degree. So the fact that she had worked 12 months at that point wasn't. I'm sorry, and she's worked 12 months makes her eligible. So let's talk about something I'm super excited to talk about today, which is a brand new and very unexpected program that was announced by the federal government 2 days ago. It's a new pathway that's permanent residents they're calling. So it's going to be we don't know. First of all, we know that the program will be open to receive applications from May 6th to November 5th. So for a 6-month period starting May 6th this year. And that the application will be online, but will not be made in express entry. So don't ask me about anything else about that application process. Nobody knows anything, at least who's not working for IRCC. But there will be a briefing on that April 21st. So after April 21st, you can expect more information. Now, when the federal government, when the Minister of Immigration, Minister Mendocino, announced this new pathway, he also announced that there would be maximum numbers of applications that could be received in the three pathways. There's one pathway for workers who work in healthcare positions, 20,000 is the max. There's another 30,000 for other selected essential occupations. We'll talk about what the occupations are a little later. And then a 40,000 cap for international students who graduated from a Canadian institution. Again, they have some requirements. But this is the part that's really interesting for people who've been studying in Quebec. They've been studying French a little. Those caps, none of them apply to an applicant who has at least CLB level 5 in all 4 abilities in French on the basis of one of the French tests that IRCC recognized. So that means maybe, you're going to finish your studies this semester, and you've been studying French, and you don't think you're at the level necessarily, let's say you're not advanced intermediate, but yeah, lower intermediate, you speak some French. You read and you write and you understand. So you take a test and you test out at, let's say, what in the TAFAC test would be level B1. The TF test would be level B1. So you're too low to qualify for Quebec, but if you're B1 across the board, you now qualify for this federal program. Now, one of the requirements, we're going to talk about the requirements, sorry, but one of the important requirements is that you intend to live in a part of Canada that is anywhere but the province of Quebec. Now, this is really going to test for a lot of people who are in Quebec how much they love the province, because these are really attractive qualifications. So you have to have successfully completed one of their program of studies. If you want the whole list, go to the website of IRCC, check it out for the pathways, new pathways for permanent residents. you have to have received a diploma or degree no earlier than January 2017 from what is the designated learning institution. Some private institutions may not be DLIs, but most of them are. You have to, again, you had to have proper authorization when you were studying and you were being educated in Canada. And at the time you apply, on the day you apply, you have to be working. If you weren't working the week before, that's not a problem. If you haven't worked for a year, that's not a problem. As long as you are working and have authorization to work, on the day you apply, you meet that requirement. Another requirement, and I've been contacted about this program just in the days since it's been launched, from people who are friends or relatives of people who are out of the country on vacation and may not be back here on May 6th. I said, well, or who are thinking about going to visit their families in another country. I said, if this is the program you want to do, don't do it, because you have to be in Canada both at the time your application is made and also at the time when your permanent residence is received. And you have to intend to live outside the province of Quebec. Now, and I'm going to, actually, this is a good time for me to say something. I don't have a slide on this, but an intent to reside outside of Quebec does not live in the same thing as actually living outside the province of Quebec. We have clear jurisprudence on it. Let's say you got on May 6th, you're still here, you just applied, you don't even know if your application is going to go through necessarily. You can, as long as you have the intention to go, you may say, hey, I've got a lease that runs till the end of June or until the end of August, and I can't afford to walk out on my lease. But after that, I will go live in Alberta or Ontario or Nova Scotia or BC or wherever. That's fine. An immigration officer may ask you to prove, to show evidence that that's your real intent. They may not just accept it because you said it, but as long as you can show that that's your intent, or else act on that intent before the decision is made in your case, you're fine. In fact, what the law says is you can have the intention to leave Quebec as much as 2 or 3 years, even three would be the absolute maximum, after you become a permanent resident, and still be on all fours with that requirement. Now, if you want your life to be simple, you should leave sooner rather than later, or have the intention to leave sooner rather than later, and have solid evidence of that. But it is important when you're thinking about these pathways, bear in mind that you don't have to be out of Quebec at the time you apply, or even anytime really soon after that. So there's a second, this may also be interesting for some people. Let's say for one reason you didn't study, or for one reason or another, your studies aren't going to put you in line to qualify for that other program. Or let's say your French tests out at level 4, not level 5, in at least one skill. This may be the answer to your problem. Now, level 4 is like pretty basic French. We're not talking somebody who has any degree of fluency. The occupations that qualify for this are generally in health. So a lot of those are quite skilled, but not all of them. You could be, private attendant for somebody. Sales, including some level C occupations like cashier, which I think is a level D occupation. Shelf stocker is another level D occupation. Service station attendant. You could be working in construction, transport, heavy equipment maintenance. So if you're a truck driver, you're working as a truck driver. If you've been working in agriculture, mining, logging, oil and gas, if you have at least 1 year of full-time experience, it doesn't have to be now, you had it in the past in Canada, you can qualify. You have to be working in this program as well in a job, but it doesn't have to be one of the jobs that's on the list. So if you've got that 1 year of experience in Canada, and level 4 French, not level 5, then this may be a very attractive pathway to permanent residence. And again, have to be in Canada when the application is submitted and when it's approved. And you don't know when it's approved, so don't move. Why make your life? Hang around for a little while here. Why is the immigration minister now trying to pass himself off as Santa Claus. Well, he is not totally disinterested. He had, right, last year, IRCC did not come close to meeting its targets for the number of new immigrants for Canada they wanted to bring in. IRCC knows that they can't bring in economic immigrants unless they're already here. So how do we get lots of immigrants this year? Well, we take them from people who are already studying and working here. So this is great news. Now, what if you don't speak French? Okay, but you're graduating or you have graduated. Let's say you're going to graduate real soon and you got a job lined up for right after you graduate and you want to be one of the 40,000 international graduates to apply. You better start getting ready. You better have your English test results ready to go on May 6th because Canada has a large number of international students. And this is a very attractive program. And I think most of my colleagues are of the view is it's not going to take very long for that 40,000 quota to be reached. It could be within a day. But let's say you're level 3 in French. You know, you're not there, but you have some French. You started learning already, and you could get there within 6 months. You've got 6 months to get that French test result, and then you can qualify. So when you compare the processing time, because the idea is to generate numbers for IRCC for 2021. So the idea they have is that they are going to make permanent residents out of most or all of these people within 8 months by the end of 2021. That compares to a processing time for Quebec of 6 months for the process of CSU, and as it stands right now, another 27 months to get your permanent residence after that. So almost 3 full years. And you can't apply until you not only have graduated, but you've also completed your 1 year of work experience. Or if you've been working here, you know, you're going to need the 2 years of work experience, which you may not have yet, and it's only in certain jobs. So if you have that 1 year of work experience already, or are about to get it in one of the jobs that qualifies you for the program, if you've been stocking shelves at a supermarket, and you have a year of work experience doing that, or you will have it soon, and you can put together that basic level 4 on French, you have until November 5th to get your application in, and you are on a fast track to immigration in Canada, which is probably going to be much faster and probably easier than anything you could do in Quebec. A possible paradoxical effect of all this is it may drag so many people out of this, the queue for Quebec permanent residence, is that Quebec's immigration processing times may come down. We'll have to see. But, you know, it's easy to see why a lot of people might think long and hard about this, especially francophones who don't have to worry about getting their applications in on the first day. So my takeaway for you is great time to be a recent graduate, particularly if you have some ability in French. So I have here some links. I think the organizers will be happy to share the PowerPoint with you. Some useful links to information that's helpful if you're trying to figure out your immigration situation. And I thank all of you for hanging in there. And I hope that the sort of little interruption wasn't too confusing, as confusing for you as it was for me. And it would be nice to see some of the people who are monitoring this. Some faces would be great, and voices would be neat. But I'd be happy to accept questions, your questions by text as well. I think they're coming in possibly, or if they haven't, now is a great time to send them. Have you got some questions, Walter?
Yeah, unfortunately, we haven't been able to recover the questions that were in the previous chat. I know.
Know that if you did send in a question on the chat earlier, it's gone, and you can do that again.
But so if you can repost those questions, we really apologize for that. However, there have been other questions that have come up. We'll deal with those that are there right now. David, can you access your chat?
Probably. If I can find out where it is.
So if I may, I can start you know, asking the questions, right? So the first question is, it's a question of, let's see, the context is not clear. It says, must work be out of Quebec? This was
No.
asked 217.
Okay, so I assume we're talking about one of the new federal pathways. And no, it's
yeah.
very, very clear that work experience in Quebec is just fine.
As long as Quebec is part of Canada.
Well, but it's weird because, of course, if you're doing a Quebec application, you can't qualify for the work experience portion with work outside Quebec, but you can work with out of Canada. And by the way, one thing that's really helpful, people who are interested in going through one of these new pathways, is that more and more Quebec employers have their employees working online and have no problem with you continue to do your job from another part of Canada. So your job may have become a lot more portable because of COVID. I found my stat.
Okay. Another question, okay. From Daniel Jimenez, can we be working in Quebec then move out?
Okay, you're talking now. Okay, well, I answer in both scenarios. If you're applying for Quebec or if you're applying for Canada. Okay, so the Quebec requirement to in the PAC is that you must have be working in Quebec at the date of your application. There's nothing, if you're from another country, there's nothing to stop you going to another country while you're waiting for your CSU. And there's nothing to stop you from going to work in another province. But it may raise a legitimate question in the mind of an officer, both in Quebec and then later on at the federal level, whether your intention is to settle in Quebec or somewhere else. So let's say you were offered a 6-month internship, and a great internship that required you to go to BC, but after that you'd be back in Quebec. That shouldn't be a problem. But if you're starting a long-term position somewhere else, it doesn't sound like a great idea.
Okay, the next one I'm going to read, but I suggest you also look at the chat just because it's a very long question.
Okay.
From Barras, right?
From Barras?
Yeah, but the bottom line is the person is talking about the two policies that we mentioned. One is the temporary public policy to facilitate the granting of PR in Canada outside of Quebec with recent credentials from a Canadian post-secondary institution. That's the one with a cap of 40,000 applicants, right? And then the second one is I don't know why they say temporary public policy, but anyways.
Well, that's what they're calling it. No, that's correct.
Okay, temporary public policy for granting of PR to foreign nationals outside of Quebec with Canadian work experience, okay?
Right.
In essential occupations, stream B. So the person asked, in which one of these two policies do you think candidates will have a higher chance of getting accepted for PR? Do they have a higher chance than the policy 1 or policy 2? And assuming that they're eligible for both. And they gave an example.
I mean, that's an interesting question, and I hope to have an answer next week. I don't know that there's anything to prevent someone from applying into both.
Oh.
That I didn't see in the materials we have until now that you're limited to a single application. And the general rule in immigration is that you're not limited. You can make multiple applications. Or you may be able to ask, actually the way it happens now, for example, in express entry, you may qualify both as a federal skilled worker and as a Canadian experience class, and they will actually consider you in both. So meaning that if a round of invitation goes out and it's only Canadian experience class and you qualify that way, you can be considered in that group as well. So that's a really interesting question, Bara. I don't know the answer. I don't know if anybody in Canada right now who would have a fast answer for that one, but keep your eyes open. There'll probably be an answer coming soon.
But if it's one or the other, though, if you have to make a choice,
I would say that 40,000 is going to fill up before the 30,000. The graduates is probably going to be the first component, first pathway to fill.
And once again, that's if you're going under as an English speaker, not as a French speaker.
Right. And the other thing is, if you get shut out of one or the other, or if you get shut out of both of those, well, you've got 6 months to get your French up to the level you need it to be. And if you've got work experience as a shelf stalker or something else that qualifies you in the essential occupation, it's not impossible to get yourself to level 4 in 6 months, even if you're starting at basically nothing.
Yeah, B1, if I remember, is what, beginner intermediate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a low intermediate. It's a very low intermediate.
Yeah. It's what
in
Quebec used to have.
You have more opportunities to learn French and practice French than anywhere else in Canada. So start now, or if on May 7th you're shut out, you're disappointed, you need to start studying French and plan to do your test, have your test results before November 5th. If you can do that, you're laughing.
And for those two public policy programs, are there processing fees on the front end or only when they've been selected?
Don't know. I'm going to guess it's probably like express entry and other electronic applications where once you, at the end of the online application process, you pay your fee online.
Okay.
Yes.
Will the recording, another question from Guy or Yi, will the recording be available anywhere? Yes, it'll be available on YouTube. You don't have to worry about that. From another question from Area, when should we start applying for the PEQ? As soon as I get my graduating letter from Concordia?
Area, that's really the question, because under the PEC, you can't do that. And you could, if you otherwise qualify, to be honest, for a new graduate, it's probably not the case, but if you did qualify right away, I don't know, maybe you're a more mature student and you have some work experience from elsewhere in Canada or another country before you came here, you should maybe look at your situation in the regular program and see if you can get a validated job offer. And if you can, yeah, you may be able to make your application quite soon after you graduate.
Mm-hmm. And that would probably, maybe Area is thinking as well about the previous old program for the
right.
PEC.
Actually, that's a good cue to talk a little bit about the grandfather clause, which I foolishly left out. So some of you might remember and have bitter memories like I do that our beloved provincial minister at the time, Mr. Jean Barrette, he promised, along with Premier Legault in November, I think it was November 2018, he said, everybody who's studying and working here is going to be grandfathered, meaning that you will be able to, in the future, apply for a Quebec selection certificate with the PEC rules that were in place on that day in November. And that turned out to be half a lie. It's true for workers. If you were working in Quebec, actually it has to be as late as July 21st last year, you only need 1 year of work experience to qualify in the PEC. Going forward, it will be the 2 years. It will be 1 year out of 2 instead of 2 years out of 3. And any level work experience, not 0 AB.
Okay.
But for the international students, they were not grandfathered. So,
yeah.
Actually, one interesting thing I'm going to mention on the grandfather, we believe, we haven't had the chance to test it, but let's say you finished your studies at Concordia last year in May, and you got your letter, and then you sent out your application for a study permit. Maybe you didn't get it back right away, but as long as you applied for your postgraduate study permit before July 21st, under Canadian law, you had the right to work in Canada from the minute you applied for your postgraduate work permit. Our belief is that at that point you're a grandfather, so you will only need 1 year of work experience in 2 years, not 2 and 3. So
okay.
That's maybe helpful to 1 or 2 people.
Okay, we have about 14 other questions before 3. We'll try to cover as much as we can. Okay, from Bingway, if I'm about to graduate and get a job outside of Quebec, am I able to apply for the new PR fast track option?
Absolutely. That's what makes it so amazing. And you don't even have to get the job outside of Quebec. You can. That's not a bad idea. But if your best job opportunities, your priority is to get the job fast.
Okay.
And if where you can get a job fast is here, do it here.
For the new federal, another question from Lukeman. For the new federal path, does any job qualify, or should it be a professional job at the time we're applying? And should we maintain the same job throughout the application, or can we change?
Okay, that's an interesting question, Lukeman. So remembering there are different paths, all right? So let's talk about the path for graduate. Any job qualifies. As I said, you might have just got the job. You might have just gotten a job working in a food truck. Perfect. You're working. That's the requirement. You graduated and you're working. Those are the requirements. You have to be here when you apply, and you have to be here when you're approved for permanent residence. Because they're not going to issue you an immigrant visa to come back to Canada. You should know that. And unfortunately, I'm sure that's going to create some unfortunate situations because somebody's parent or grandparent is going to be on their deathbed, and it'll be a tragic situation. But those are the rules. And let's talk about it now in the other path, the one that's the essential industry. So I wouldn't call it a professional job, but you have to be working, and you have to have 1 year of work experience, whether it's prior to making your application in one or more of those occupations. Because let's say I worked as a gas station attendant and as stocking shelves. I did one for 6 months and the other one for 9. I've got 15. I'm good. I have to be working on the day I apply. I may be doing something completely different. I may be doing a totally different job at that point. I may be, in another place doing another job. Doesn't matter. I'm working. That's the requirement. Mm-hmm. So look at, the stuff is online, and look at it, and it may look, the problem I think people have is they look at it and it looks too good to be true. Look at it again, read it carefully. That's actually what it says.
Okay, another question from Carolina. College studies of 900 hours are considered for the recent federal announcement?
Right. And not for the PAC. Right. You're reading well, Carolina.
Okay. Another question from Bingwei. If I have already applied for my CSQ, am I able to apply for this new PR fast track and will affect my current status?
Nope. Yes and no. And by the way, in federal law, you may even have a pending application as a Quebec skilled worker sitting around collecting dust at the office in Sydney, Nova Scotia. That doesn't prevent you from making this application. And you don't even necessarily have to withdraw the Quebec one. The only situation in federal law where you're not allowed to have 2 applications at the same time is there can't be 2 applications to sponsor the same person at the same time. The law says that. Everything else, fair game. You can have 2, 3, and 4 applications for permanent residence, and you have to pay for them. It's not necessarily a very economical way to do your business, but it's allowed. It's legal.
Okay. This one comes over and over again. If I'm eligible for the fast track PR and I get it, will I be able to move back to Quebec?
Okay. Interesting question. I'll try and give a fast answer. So when you become a permanent resident, you're a permanent resident of Canada, not Quebec. But when you do that federal application, and I don't want to minimize this in any way, it's important that you have the sincere intention at that time to live outside Quebec. I'll try and explain this through a recent example. Someone contacted me, and they just got their permanent residence through Quebec a couple months ago, and they called me they're in Ontario. I said, uh-oh. Turned out that he was looking for work here. He has a friend who had moved to Toronto. The friend's company contacted him, asked if he was interested, made him a nice offer. He went there. The fact is, like 2 months ago when he got his permanent residence, he was here and planning to stay here. His intentions changed afterwards. That's fine.
Okay. About how long does it take to gain citizenship after receiving PR?
Okay, so the Citizenship Act, the requirement is that you have to have 3 years of residence, and they will give you some credit for time that you were legally in Canada before you became a permanent resident. The maximum is a year. So if you were here, let's say as a student for 3 years, and then you became a permanent resident and stayed here for 2 years continuously without ever leaving the country, well, the fastest that anyone could ever do it would be 2 years after becoming a permanent resident. Because you would get 1 year of credit. They sort of give you a 50%, they give you days at a 50% discount before you're a permanent resident, for example, while you're a student. So you could get 1 year of credit for while you were a student, and then you get another year, 2 years for your 2 years right after you became a permanent resident, and then 2 years and 1 day you could apply.
Okay, a question from Shub. Does co-op work experience count as work experience?
Okay, I'm assuming that work experience was work experience that was a requirement of a degree, part of a co-op study program, and the answer is no, it doesn't.
Okay.
I think there is some, actually, I think in the new federal program, there's some leeway for some of it to think. If you want the right answer, go back, read that, because I haven't digested the whole thing, but I think I saw there's, I think up to 3 months or something, you might be able to get credit for that kind of work. Go have a look at the rules. But
for the PEQ, for the PEC,
yeah,
some of that, okay, would be eligible. But if Shub is referring to the federal, it's supposed to be work experience after the degree.
right. And I said in this new program, I think there's a provision in some situations for some of it. Have a look. It's there.
Okay.
It wasn't that the wording wasn't that exotic.
Okay. From Sandesh,
can we hold Sandesh's question?
Okay. Can we hold an employment in Quebec, get a paycheck, and be living physically outside the province, and be eligible for the CEC Express entry application?
So first of all, let's remember, Sandesh, that it doesn't matter where you live when you apply. It's about where you intend to be after you become a permanent resident. But it's about where you intend to live, not where you intend to work. So this is a question that not infrequently comes up, let's say, for people who have a job in Gatineau, which is just beside Ottawa. You just have to cross a bridge. You can walk from one to the other. So there is no problem for a person to apply in a federal program and live in Ottawa and have a job in Gatineau, Quebec. So it's about where you're living. So by the same logic, there's no problem to get a paycheck from Quebec and live in another province and meet the requirements for a federal program.
Okay, another question. If I get a job in Quebec, how does the fast track then apply to me? How do I prove that I'm planning to move outside of Quebec?
Dungui, that's a great question. You should probably hire me because I do a lot of that work, but it really depends on the person. And it also depends on your risk tolerance. If you have some risk tolerance, you can simply send them a letter explaining, here's what I'm going to do. Here's my plan. Here are some jobs I've applied for. And say, I'm stuck here until end of August because I've got a lease that I can't get out of and I don't want to pay. I can't afford to pay two rents at the same time. But here, I'm applying for jobs and I've been looking for apartments in this other place in Canada. And I've reserved a mover to move my furniture. There are different ways to do it. It's kind of a mind game. It's always you have to show intention. So you have to make the officer feel confident that looking inside your head, that's really what you're planning to do. But it's doable. Now, the easiest thing is honestly, when they send you that letter, if you're still here, leave. Go get an apartment somewhere else. Start working remotely from that place or get a job over there, things like that. Move your stuff there, change your phone number to a local area code over there. There are a whole series of things you can do.
Okay, and there's a question, is there a way that we can schedule an appointment with the Legal Information Clinic to help understand how this new system works? Of course, the only thing is we're presently closed for final exams right now, but we're going to be reopening in mid-May. And once we reopen, we will have access to lawyers such as Mtre David Chalk, who is part of our legal network. Those lawyers who are part of our legal network, they also offer preferential rates and very reasonable payment schedules. So you can go to Mtre Chalk directly as well, right? As long as you and maybe if you say that you've come to this conference today, he can apply those same criteria as well. So those that are lucky enough to have been attending today, well, you're going to get a benefit right away. But at the same time, we do work with Mtre Chalk in order to help prep your file. So he'll be more efficient in
save you money
in applying the law.
And save you money. Less work for me, less fees for the client.
Basically, we help him do the grunt work.
Sarah had another good question.
Okay, go ahead.
Which was, will the new public policy be first come first served? Don't know, but I'm guessing probably the only nuances, as I was saying before, it may be that you can ask to be first come first served in more than one stream at a time. So you may be able to come in under the 30 and under the 40 if whichever one you're.
And once again, let's not forget, right? English applicants, there are caps. and caps from like you're competing with everyone in Toronto, Vancouver, everywhere. Whereas French speaking, there's no caps, right? Right, David?
I got another interesting question from Billingui. I'm Billingui. I'm sure I'm massacring your name, but so I apologize in advance. It's like there's a vowel missing, but someday I hope to know how to pronounce it correctly. So is fast track only available? And we're calling it fast track. It's actually not faster, I think, than express entry, because express entry is 6 months processing, and I think that's about what we're talking about in the new program. But only eligible to those who are working, or can Masters International students apply for it? The answer is got to be working. You have to have completed your, so if you did a bachelor's and you moved on to a master's, you would have to real quick stop your master's, get a work permit, get a job, apply in that.
Yeah, actually, that's one question that many graduate students have to come to us. They're saying, as long as I have not obtained my degree yet, right, but I'm working, am I eligible for these programs? Master's and as well doctorate, because doctorate cases are extremely.
Right. So I think the interesting question is, I think your requirement is you have to be working full time. I'll double check. I'm not sure, maybe. But I think it may also say you need to have a work permit, or permission to work. So if I was a doctoral candidate and I was somehow allowed to work full time or work in general, I don't know. Good question. I'll ask and I'll find out. Come back to me after the 21st.
Okay. So another question from Huang Trung. For the extended postgrad work permit, the 1.5-year extension counts towards the end of the existing postgrad work permit, or from the date of the application?
So from the end of the previous work permit. Yeah. It's an add-on, not from the date of the application.
Okay. What happens if I get the permanent resident, then I end up staying in Quebec because I don't get a job offer?
With the question. Well, that's not, you're asking the wrong question. You're asking the question is, did I have the intent? The day I became a permanent resident, was it my intent to leave Quebec? As I said in my example, I had a real life situation where the person had that intention to stay here and didn't have a job and then got one a short time later. In my view, that person is on all fours with the law, doesn't have a problem. Mm-hmm. If the person had really arranged that job ahead of time and then didn't take it for a little while to make it look like they had a different intention than what they really did, my answer would change.
Yeah. And one thing as well, be very, very careful. Students must be very, very careful with social media or their social media or any other electronic communication they do, because immigration, they also check Facebook and Twitter and all this other stuff.
And LinkedIn. So, you know, if you're supposed to be outside the province and you're showing employment in the province, unless you're able to show them that you're working remotely, you know, you may be putting yourself in a difficult situation.
Yeah. Be smart and show that you have what we call good faith, bonne foi in French. Let's see. Okay, for the fast track permanent residency process, does being employed part-time count? So maybe talk a bit about part-time work.
Hold on, I think it just says be employed. So I think it does.
Well, but they're asking about part-time work.
Right. Well, part-time work is work. If I have a part-time job, I'm employed. I don't think it says how many hours I have to work. I may just be working weekends. This is a question you can be sure people will be asking on April 21st, and we should get answers.
Yeah.
But if I'm going off the wording on the website, work. I have a job.
Okay, so
I'm not self-employed. So it could be better for me to have a job stocking pharmacy shelves on the weekend for 16 hours only, versus working 60 hours a week for an Uber, where they're likely to consider I'm self-employed and I don't qualify for that. But the interesting situation is, what if I work Monday to Friday driving an Uber, And then Saturday and Sunday, I stock shelves.
Okay. I remember in the previous questions, there were questions about implied status. So especially because of processing times, right? What if the person doesn't get their post-grad work permit before, can he continue working? And and does that work experience count as well towards
Well, first of all,
residency?
For post-grad work permit, we're talking about the extension now? Or the original? Because the original one,
the original.
The original one, because the original one, you have the right to work without a permit from the day you apply. You're not in implied status. You have the right to work. But let's say you're applying for an extension and you apply close to the expiration date of your postgraduate work permit. Yeah, you could be implied in that scenario.
Wait,
that's fine. It's very clear.
I'm sorry, could you clarify? You just said if you're applying for a postgrad work permit, right, that you can start work right away without confirmation that that postgrad work permit was granted?
I don't remember the article that's in the reg. Yep, it's 186 actually. It's part of 186 of the regulation. It's in the regulation of 180. I don't remember what letter, but it's in 186.
Okay, we'll get back to you on that. Just because.
Sure about that.
Yeah. Okay.
But here's another cool thing. So you could be, let's see, you have to be working on the, I'm trying to think how this would work, because there are even references to somebody who's applying for restoration. So what grads need to understand is I had a client this year who had been out of status since May 2020. And then the public policy came in, which allowed him to apply for an 18-month extension, even if he was out of status. So we applied for restoration. And by the way, they're processing those restoration applications really fast. So in less than 3 weeks, he was back at work.
Wow.
Yeah. He was back at work with an 18-month open work permit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even though he had been out of status for 7 or 8 months when we applied for him, maybe 9.
Yeah, and one thing which we didn't have time, obviously, to touch upon today, but as Mtre Chalk also mentioned, there are COVID-19 specific policy guidelines that come out almost every week, depending upon IRCC, definitely every month. So, apart from all the information that they provide on questions of permanent residency, it's always important for someone looking at immigration also to consider the COVID-19 specific guidelines. So, once again, we offer the free service at the CSU to undergrads, and very soon, for those who are graduate students, you have a fee levy referendum coming up on Monday. So if you're a graduate student, I highly recommend that you make sure that you vote in the referendum. I can't tell you whether to vote for the fee levy or against the fee levy, but if you feel that the services that we offer at the CSU Legal Information Clinic are of interest to you and are worthwhile, then at the very least, please go vote. Okay. It's online voting for graduate students. You have Monday and you have Tuesday to vote. Please vote so that we can offer you free consultations, with the assistance, of course, access to noted lawyers such as Mtre Chalk. It's $2.50 a semester.
We've run out our questions.
We're running out of time. Okay, let's see how many more questions. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's about it. And in any case, once again, okay, we'll be open once again at the CSU Legal Information Clinic for new appointments in mid-May. once we get our law students back, because right now everyone is in their final exams, we will handle emergency cases. If you're out of status, please do contact us. You know, if you're having questions regarding your present status, come see us. If it is an emergency, then we'll try our best to deal with your file. But it's just that right now, all our volunteer law students are in their final exams. Okay, thank you so much once again to Mtre Chalk for his wisdom and expertise. And I'd also like to give a special thanks to our support staff, Ugarit, who is a person responsible for the social media support. Thanks as well to Nicole for having presented us with the diversity survey. And once again, for the video will be available. We'll have the PowerPoint at the clinic, but we won't necessarily be distributing it publicly, just because the problem we found in the past is that people depend too much on documents that can be very easily outdated. We prefer that you come in and we'll provide you with up-to-date information. Okay, and I guess that's it for today. And once again, please answer the CSU diversity survey and go vote in the referendum. Okay, thank you very much, and that'll be it for today.
Okay, bye all.
Bye.